The garden at Elder Hollow. Before the story begins, let us take a moment. Close your eyes. Breathe in, slowly, deeply. Feel the weight of the day slip away, like fog retreating from morning hills. Let your thoughts soften, like petals after rain. And now, drift with me, to a quiet place, in a quieter time, to the soft hills of Devonshire where something once forgotten begins to bloom again. Chapter 1. A House That Waited. Elder Hollow had stood for over 200 years. Built of stone, the color of moonlight, it rested gently in the fold of a hill, half hidden by yew trees and wild roses. Ivy climbed its walls like patient fingers, and the roof, sloped and mossy, wore time like a soft green shawl. The house did not speak, but it remembered, and it waited. Waited for laughter, waited for the swing of small feet on old wooden floors, waited for the scent of lemon cakes rising from a forgotten oven. It waited for Clara. Chapter 2. The girl with the heavy heart, Clara, was not the kind of girl who ran toward new places. Grief had made her quiet, and silence had made her small. At 12 years old, she had seen more goodbyes than birthdays, and each suitcase she packed felt heavier than the one before. Her parents, gentle, bookish people, had gone too soon, their absence echoing louder than any sound. And now, Clara found herself climbing the winding road to Elder Hollow, to live with a great aunt she'd never met, in a village she couldn't pronounce, in a house that looked like it belonged in a dream or a memory. Chapter 3. A locked door in the orchard wall. Days passed, softly and slowly. Aunt Agatha, stern but not unkind, left Clara mostly to herself. There was a hush in the house, like a library long forgotten by readers. Clara wandered the grounds in quiet hours. She watched the clouds skim the hills. She counted the crows perched along the garden fence, and one morning, beneath a silver mist, she followed a curious blackbird past the orchard trees, to a wall, tall, weather-worn, covered in lichen and ivy. At its base, nearly hidden by fern and thistle, was a gate, but the gate was locked, and Clara, for the first time in a long time, felt curious. Chapter 4. A Boy, a Hedgehog, and a Smile. A few days later, Clara met Finn. She found him kneeling in the lane beside a wounded hedgehog, whispering nonsense words like a spell. He looked up and smiled, wide, crooked, honest. Finn spoke gently, never rushed. He knew the names of trees, the songs of birds, and believed that everything, if listened to, could speak back. Together they carried the hedgehog to the tool shed. Finn bandaged its paw with moss and a strip of his own shirt. And Clara smiled, a small one, barely there, but real. Friendship, she would later learn, often begins not with words, but with quiet company. Chapter 5. The Attic and the Ribboned Key. One rain-drenched afternoon, the wind led Clara up to the attic. Dust danced like gold in the air, and forgotten trunks lined the beams like sleepy travelers. She opened one. Inside, lace gloves, old letters, and a key. Tied with a blue ribbon, faded and soft. Clara knew. She didn't need to ask. This was the key, the one that matched the gate in the orchard wall. Her heart whispered yes, and something inside her chest, a tiny old locked door, opened too. Chapter 6. The garden sleeps no more that night. Beneath a sky littered with stars, Clara tiptoed through wet grass. The key turned, the gate sighed, and she stepped into a forgotten world. Vines coiled over broken benches, stone paths lay buried beneath moss, a sundial leaned crooked in the moonlight. But the air was sweet. Even in slumber, the garden dreamed. Day by day, with Finn's help, Clara cleared branches and brushed away decay. They planted seeds, whispered wishes into the soil, waited, and slowly, green returned. Chapter 7. Whispers of the Past. One morning, Clara found a bench beneath a flowering hawthorn. She sat, closed her eyes, and she could almost hear it. Children's laughter, the rustle of skirts, a girl's voice singing. The garden was not empty. It was remembering. That afternoon, Aunt Agatha appeared by the open gate, her eyes wide, her hands trembling. She hadn't walked inside in over 20 years, not since Lydia, her daughter, had passed. The garden had been hers, and now it lived again. Chapter 8. Rebirth. Spring deepened, bluebells bloomed, bees returned. Clara wrote poems in the garden. Finn built a tiny bench for the hedgehog, who now hobbled freely among the herbs. Aunt Agatha baked lemon cakes she read aloud in the evenings. Her voice, though cracked, carried the warmth of old lullabies. One night she took Clara's hand and said, "You've brought life back, child, not just to the garden, but to me." And Clara believed her, because healing is quiet but real. Epilogue, where love waits years past. Clara never left Elder Hollow. She became a writer, a gardener, and some whispered, a bit of a magician. Finn became a keeper of creatures, tending to wildlings and wanderers alike. And the garden never closed. It welcomed those who needed stillness, those who carried loss in their bones, those who had forgotten how to bloom. At the gate hung a wooden sign, the Lydia Garden, a place to rest, to remember, to grow. And it was, and always will be. Closing words. Now, dear dreamer, let the image of Elder Hollow stay with you. Feel the soft wind through the trees, the scent of earth and rain and blooming lavender. Know that somewhere a garden waits for you. You are safe, you are loved, and the parts of you that felt forgotten are ready to grow again. Good night. The story The Light in Fernbridge House, Chapter 1. The Wetherells of Fernbridge. Fernbridge House had weathered many winters. Its stones, warmed by the sun of many summers past, now bore the wisdom of time. Each wooden beam and creaky stair had heard lullabies, arguments, and whispered dreams. It stood, tucked into the folds of a Yorkshire hill, surrounded by gorse and bramble, and a garden that grew wild with more love than order. Inside lived the Wetherells. Margaret Wetherell, known simply as Mama Meg, carried a quiet strength in her bones, the kind that came not from power but from purpose. She had 4 daughters. Eliza, thoughtful and serene, with eyes that seemed always to be searching for something in the distance. Rowan, whose untamed hair matched her spirit, blunt, brave, and fiercely loyal. Ivy, whose hands were always stained with ink or wildflowers, and who saw poetry in rain puddles. And Maisie, the youngest, barely 10, whose laughter arrived before her footsteps. The house was small, the days were simple, but the love inside it, oh, it filled every corner. Chapter 2. The Long Goodbye. Mr. Wetherell, a schoolmaster turned soldier, had been gone for nearly a year. He had left not with gallantry, but with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes, with a kiss pressed gently to his daughters' foreheads and a promise he hoped he could keep. "I'll come back." But war has a way of stealing time and replacing it with silence. Letters came and then stopped. And though Mama Meg never once said the word fear, her girls began to notice how long she stood by the fire at night, staring into the flames as if hoping to hear news in the crackle. Yet she smiled each morning. She stirred the porridge. She darned their socks. She was the light that did not flicker, even when the wind howled. Chapter 3. The gift of little things winter that year arrived with teeth. The snow clung to the windows, the well froze over, and the cupboards echoed with quiet. There was no coal to waste, no sweets for the holidays, no velvet ribbons for hair. But in Fernbridge, love took other shapes. Ivy sewed patches shaped like stars on Maisie's coat. Rowan chopped firewood with bare hands and a red nose. Eliza walked 2 miles each day to help an elderly neighbor read his forgotten books. And Mama Meg, she made magic from nothing, turned potato skins into soup, sorrow into lullabies, and scraps of old dresses into doll clothes for the village orphanage. Their home became a sanctuary, not from suffering, but from indifference. Chapter 4. A Secret Under the Floorboards. One frost-bitten evening, Eliza opened the floorboard beneath the old settee. It was a place they had once kept summer preserves, long emptied. Inside, wrapped in worn parchment and tied with blue twine, was a collection of letters. They were her father's, all of them, unspeakably tender, unsent. In them he spoke of dreams, of planting roses in the garden for Ivy, of carving a writing desk for Eliza. He spoke of guilt for leaving, and of pride for who his daughters were becoming. Eliza read them aloud by candlelight. There were tears that night, but also laughter, warm as bread just pulled from the oven. Sometimes, knowing someone loves you is enough to keep going. Chapter 5. Rowan's Storm. Rowan, who never cried, grew quiet in January. She returned one night later than usual, soaked to the skin, her gloves torn. Ivy found her in the hayloft, staring out at the sleet. "I'm so angry," Rowan whispered. "At the world, at everything. At him, for going, at Mama, for pretending not to be scared, at myself, for not being brave enough to fix it. And Ivy, with her ink-stained fingers, said gently, "Maybe it's not our job to fix the world. Maybe it's enough just to keep lighting candles in the dark." Rowan said nothing, but when she came down from the loft, she took Maisie's hand and didn't let go all evening. Chapter 6. The Envelope. It came at last in March, a letter, sealed in a plain envelope. No fanfare, no official crest. Mama Meg opened it slowly. Her hands trembled. The words inside were brief: wounded, alive, recovering in a hospital near Dover, travel permitted. But there was no money for the journey. Silence fell like snowfall. Then Eliza stood. "I'll sell my books. I'll sell my paints," said Ivy. "My boots," Rowan added. "I can go barefoot till summer." Even Maisie, little Maisie, offered her savings: 2 buttons, a marble, and a peppermint. Mama Meg looked at her girls and saw, not children, but stars, each burning with a love that refused to go out. Chapter 7. The Reunion. 3 days later, beneath a pale spring sun, they reached the hospital. He sat in a wooden chair by the window, thinner than they remembered, hair more silver than ash. But the moment he saw them, his face broke into pieces. He wept, not the kind of weeping that makes sound, but the kind that rocks a man like wind through the trees. They stayed for hours, said everything, and nothing. Let touch and time do what words could not. And when they returned to Fernbridge, it was with 5 shadows, not 4. Chapter 8. Light. After all, life never became perfect. Rain still leaked through the roof, chores never stopped, and grief, though smaller, still visited sometimes in the hush before dawn. But the house laughed again. The fire crackled with warmth, not just heat. The girls danced in the kitchen, they sang while sweeping, and Mr. Wetherell carved a small wooden plaque for the garden gate. It read, "Here lives love, in all its quiet, ordinary glory." And in that, there was everything. So if you ever find yourself in a dark season, if the world outside your window feels too heavy to bear, think of Fernbridge, of sisters who gave without asking, of a mother who held the sky aloft, of a house that never had much, but somehow always had enough. And remember this: family is not always loud, love is not always grand, but kindness is always light, and it waits for you, in a warm kitchen, on a quiet hill, with the kettle humming softly, and the lantern still glowing in the window. Good night. You are not alone. You are home. Willowbrook, The Girl from the Gray Sky, Part 1, Chapter 1, The Red-Haired Girl and the Misty Village. Willowbrook was a small village nestled in the eastern part of England, where winding cobblestone paths and old brick houses were draped in ivy, and every morning a veil of mist wrapped the whole place like a soft gray silk scarf. One late autumn morning, a horse-drawn carriage stopped at the village station. Stepping down was a girl about 13 years old, with fiery red hair like the first leaves of fall, wearing a worn brown cloak and holding an old thick book with a bookmark made of a dried leaf. Her name was Eevee Ren. Eevee was an orphan, sent to live in Willowbrook with 2 elderly sisters, Mrs. Elsbeth and Miss Meredith Thornton, who lived in a cream-colored house named Rosehill Cottage, a small home surrounded by blooming rose gardens all year round. Elsbeth originally wanted to take in a boy to help around the house, but when she saw Eevee step down from the carriage, small yet bright-eyed, she sighed quietly and nodded. Well, fate brought her here, so we shall accept. Chapter 2. The Early Days at Rosehill. Eevee was unlike other children. Instead of fearing the rain, she liked sitting by the window watching raindrops slide down the glass. She talked to the maple tree in the garden, named the stray cat Duke, and often ended her day writing letters to the sky, though she never sent them. The villagers said, "That girl is strange." But Meredith, the kinder sister, only smiled and said, "Strange often comes with a beautiful heart." Slowly, Eevee filled the spaces Elsbeth didn't know were empty: a chair at the dining table, a small pillow on the sofa, and soft singing while washing dishes in the afternoon. Chapter 3. The Lavender Field and the Cracked Porcelain Vase. That spring, the village prepared for the annual spring fair, the only time villagers gathered after a long winter. Eevee offered to help at the tea stall. She had learned to brew floral tea from Meredith. Using lavender picked from the hill behind the house, she made small fabric bags of tea, each hand embroidered with a name. A poor boy named Theo, known for skipping school and living with an alcoholic father, secretly took one of the tea bags. The villagers were angry. Elsbeth wanted to call the police, but Eevee approached the boy, gently placed her hand on his shoulder, and quietly said, "If you like it, I can make more for you. Just promise to ask next time." The village fell silent, and for the first time in many years, Elsbeth felt a warm lump in her throat. Chapter 4. The Letter in the Glass Bottle. One rainy afternoon, Eevee ran into the forest looking for Duke. On the way, she slipped and fell by an ancient oak tree. As she got up, she discovered a small glass bottle beneath the tree roots containing an old letter. The letter was from a woman named Florence, addressed to Eevee 20 years in the future. "Dear Eevee, if you are the one who finds this letter, you are living in Willowbrook. Maybe you are sad, but you are not alone. Know that kindness always has a home somewhere, and that home is waiting for you." Eevee took the letter home, framed it, and placed it on her desk. Chapter 5. The Radiant Summer Day. 3 years passed. Eevee was now 16. Her red hair longer, still wild, her eyes sparkling like morning sunlight. She opened a reading corner in the rose garden of Rose Hill, a place where villagers could come to sit, read, or simply be quiet. She still wrote letters to the sky, but now she sent them to those she loved, an old widower, a single mother, and young Theo, who had learned to read. On her 16th birthday, she received a letter from Elsbeth. "Dear Eevee, you came like a strange breeze, stirring every fold in my heart. I've never given birth, but I think this is what motherhood feels like. Thank you for coming." Eevee wept, not from loss, but from being found. The ending. The bright sky over old roofs. Willowbrook remained small, misty, and rainy. But those who lived there said, something changed since the red-haired girl arrived. Rose Hill was now a place for reading gatherings where the lonely found each other, and the first photo of Duke the cat still hung by the front door. Eevee was not famous or extraordinary, but she had done something great. She rekindled faith in humanity, little by little, with tea bags, small letters, and gentle forgiveness. Sleep comes softly, like lavender leaves brushing the window, and somewhere on the breeze you might hear Eevee whisper, "Good night, and don't forget to be kind." Part 2. Chapter 1. The Gate Opens to Untold Stories. Eevee was now 22, her red hair longer, often tied back with a lavender ribbon. She was no longer the girl she used to be, but in the village's eyes, Eevee still brought spring wherever she went. One May day, as golden sunlight shone on Rose Hill's roof, Elsbeth, the mother she loved most, quietly passed away in her sleep. Eevee did not cry in front of anyone. She quietly packed the wool scarves Elsbeth had knitted, the teacups smelling faintly of old peppermint, and a small wooden box Elsbeth left for her, a carefully drawn old map marking a house at the village's edge, by the willow stream. "This is your mother's house, your birth mother. If you wish, visit her once, Eevee." A short note inside. Chapter 2. The Woman by the Streamside House. The house by the stream was covered in moss and wind-whispered leaves. Eevee knocked. The door opened to a woman around 40, black hair streaked with silver, named Celeste. Inside the small room, they sat facing each other, the red-haired girl and the weary woman. Celeste confessed in a trembling voice, "I was too young to raise you. I never thought I was good enough to keep you. But I have never stopped thinking about you, Eevee." Eevee stayed silent for a long moment, then gently opened her old notebook and wrote, "Goodness is having the courage to come back. Thank you for opening the door." Celeste wept. Chapter 3. Summer of New Growth. Eevee began visiting Celeste weekly. She taught her how to plant trees, brew lavender tea. Together, they repainted the old house and opened the doors long closed. Once gloomy, the house now smelled of baked bread, soft songs, and sunlight streaming in each morning. The villagers noticed a changed Celeste, once withdrawn, now smiling more, giving jars of strawberry jam at the market. When an old lady asked Celeste, "What changed you?" Celeste only looked toward Eevee, who was tending a small tomato plant by the market, and smiled softly. "A seed from the sky long ago has blossomed here." Chapter 4. The Outdoor Library and the Stranger with Gentle Eyes. One June morning, Evie opened a wind library, a place where people could leave books, take a handwritten letter, a tea bag, or a small wish. That's when a stranger appeared. His name was Robin Ashford, visiting the village to write about people who live with heart. Tall, with tousled hair and eyes as gentle as late afternoon sun, he chose a copy of The Secret Garden and left a handwritten note. I don't know who runs this place, but if you read this, thank you for keeping goodness alive. Evie did not reply, but left a cup of floral tea by the book the next time. Then again, and again. They began to talk, not loudly, but through scraps of letters, short greetings, and warm glances in the lavender garden. Chapter 5. A Promise Under the Moon. Summer waned. Robin stayed longer than expected, helping Evie teach children to write letters, build bookshelves, and sharing stories of distant lands he had traveled. One bright moonlit night, they sat by the willow stream. Robin said, "Have you ever thought of leaving Willowbrook?" Evie was silent for a moment, then smiled softly. "I once dreamed of many places, but perhaps the most beautiful thing is to make the place you live a dream for others." Robin took her hand, gently, as if a breeze might carry it away. "Then let me be the one to stay in that dream with you." The ending. Autumn wind and the unsigned letter months later, as autumn painted the fields gold, Evie placed her final letter inside the glass bottle once buried beneath the oak tree long ago. To the red-haired girl who once thought she was only a wanderer in this world, know that you have become home for many. And the most beautiful thing is, you remain yourself, fully and gently. The wind stirred softly. If you ever pass through Willowbrook, you might see a small cream-colored house, late-blooming lavender, and two people, a red-haired girl and a gentle-eyed man, reading quietly together. They are not famous, but they live slowly and truly, and their kindness spreads like warm tea on an autumn afternoon. Sleep well. Tonight, your dreams may take you to Willowbrook, where every loving heart is welcome. The story, The Lighthouse Keeper's Evening, Chapter 1. The Man in the Lighthouse. His name was Elias Thorne, and he had lived alone in the lighthouse at Windmere Point for many years. With hair like salt and eyes the color of the Atlantic on a gray morning, Elias was not a lonely man, though solitude wrapped around him like an old woolen coat. Each day followed a rhythm as dependable as the tide. He would rise before the gulls, warm water in the kettle, and greet the morning with a whisper, "Another day to keep the light." The villagers below often said, "No ship has ever crashed on Windmere Rock, not with old Elias keeping watch." And Elias, he never once let the flame go out. Chapter 2. The Sky Beneath His Feet. The lighthouse stood tall, whitewashed and proud, with 7 spiraling flights of stairs. From the lantern room at the top, Elias could see the whole world. To the west, the sea stretching into endless gray. To the east, meadows dotted with sheep and stone cottages. And to the south, the village of Windmere, nestled like a child beneath the hill. Sometimes he'd stand at the railing and imagine stories, of ships returning home, of letters unopened, of someone somewhere thinking of him. But mostly he listened to the wind. It told him things in a language without words. Chapter 3. The Little Red Journal. Every evening, just before the last glow of daylight faded, Elias opened a small red leather journal. It had been a gift long ago from someone he once loved, someone who had sailed away and never returned. In it, he didn't write stories or poetry, just thoughts, gentle ones. Today, the sea was calm. A gull landed on the sill. The wind smelled like lavender from the village. "I thought of Martha today. I hope she found what she was looking for." The words were simple, but they gave his evenings shape, and his memories room to breathe. Chapter 4. A Visitor in the Fog. One misty evening in late spring, as Elias climbed the stairs with his lantern, he saw something unusual. A shape on the steps, curled like a question mark, wet, shivering. It was a cat, small, storm-colored, its eyes bright as candlelight. Elias bent slowly, offering his hand. The cat didn't run. Instead, it blinked once, as if to say, "Well, it's about time," and followed him up the stairs. He named her Tide. And from that night on, Elias wasn't entirely alone. Chapter 5. the language of quiet things. Tide didn't meow often. She simply followed Elias from room to room, sat by the journal when he wrote, curled beside the kettle as it warmed. Elias began to talk aloud more, sometimes to Tide, sometimes to the waves, sometimes to the moon. He found that his thoughts flowed more easily when shared, even if no one answered. And the lighthouse, once silent, began to hum with small sounds, clinking spoons, scratching claws, the low warm murmur of goodnight tide. It wasn't noise, it was belonging. Chapter 6. Messages in the Sea. Elias began collecting driftwood and stones during his morning walks. On each piece he wrote tiny messages in chalk. You are not alone, the night will pass, the stars are watching with you. Then he would leave them along the path for others to find. He never signed his name, he never saw who picked them up, but sometimes he'd find a fresh flower left in return, or a shell, or a note that said, "Thank you, whoever you are." And that was enough. Chapter 7. The Storm and the Silence. One night a storm came, not the kind with rain, but the kind with wind, a wind that shook the tower and howled like something ancient. Elias stayed at the top, the beacon steady, the cat curled against his chest, lightning flashed, the sea boiled, and in the village children pressed faces to windows, whispering, "He's up there, he'll keep the light." And he did, even when the wind stole his breath, even when the loneliness clawed like waves at his heart, even when memories of Martha came rushing back like ghosts in the fog, he kept the light. Chapter 8. The morning after. At dawn the storm passed. The air smelled of salt and renewal. The sea, once wild, now gleamed like glass. The gulls returned. So did the sun. Elias opened the window and breathed it all in. Tide nudged his hand. He reached for the little red journal. The sea was angry last night, but the light stayed on. We stayed on. Then he lit the stove, poured 2 saucers of milk, one for himself and one for the cat, because survival, he realized, deserved ceremony. Chapter 9. The lantern in the dark years passed. People came and went. Boats sailed. Children grew. But the lighthouse remained, and so did Elias. Now and then a young sailor would visit, or a stranger would write, "Your light saved us. We saw it just in time." Elias would nod, smile. But inside he'd whisper, "I saw you too." He wasn't famous. He wasn't rich. But every night someone looked toward Windmere Point and saw his light, and felt, if only for a moment, less alone. Now, as you close your eyes, think of the lighthouse, tall, steady, wrapped in mist, with a man who writes in quiet journals and a cat who purrs beside the lantern. Think of the waves rolling in and out, just like your breath. Think of the sky wrapping the earth like a blanket. Think of the light, still glowing, just for you. Good night. You are safe, you are loved, and the light is always there, even in the dark.